Hello, yes, that's right. It's Joe here for Joyrider TV. And we've got coming up in less than a month now the Tornado World Championships. And in preparation for going to the Tornado World Championships, I have been feeling, what can I do to boost my results? Because if you've been following my progress in the Tornado fleet, you may have seen that perhaps my results could have been better. Perhaps I was making mistakes on the race course. So I am absolutely delighted to introduce today the team from Road to Gold. We've got Andy and Hamish, and the Road to Gold course has got to be the best self-coaching course out there on the internet, which takes you through the whole process of everything you need to know, you need to do to boost your results on the race course. So today we're just going to be having a chat to see what am I doing wrong and what could I be doing better. So introducing Andy.
Joe, thank you very much for that. Absolute pleasure for me and Hamish to be on the call today. Yeah, I'm a sailing journalist. I cover a lot of the big events on the racing scene. So from the Olympics to Sail GP, to the round the world races and America's Cup. And I come from a racing background myself. And funnily enough, even though I'm not a lot younger than Hamish Wilcox, I used to avidly read Hamish's articles in Yachts and Yachting magazine in the UK when he was telling us how to go fast in a 470, and Hamish winning 3 world championships in the 470 in the 1980s in a 4-year period. He and David Barnes were absolute legends back in the 1980s, and he was my guru. So when I got to interview Hamish a few years ago, it was an interview for Seahorse magazine, and I heard that Hamish had written a book back in the day about how to win in 470s. That's what I've been trying to do 30 years earlier. So I'm thinking, how did I not hear about this book? I'd never seen it. He said, oh yeah, well, it was only published in Japanese. And this book is the best-selling book in Japan about sailing. The first 10,000 copies sold out in no time flat, just in the Japanese language. But Hamish had been meaning to do an update of the book and do it in English. And I said, well, I'll help you. And then I thought, no, we're in the 21st century. Let's not do a book. Let's do an online video course. And between us in 2020, 5 years ago, Hamish and I developed that book. And well, Hamish is still, I know he won't want to talk about it, but I will. Hamish is one of the most respected coaches in the world. He's worked with Pete Burling and Blair Tuke for almost a decade in the 49er when they were winning 6 world titles, and they won 3 Olympic medals, including gold in Rio 2016. And more recently, he's been coaching in the America's Cup, helping the Kiwis win the America's Cup in 2021, working with Luna Rossa in Barcelona last year in 2024, and also helping the Spanish team. He's their coach behind the scenes in Sail GP. They won the season in Sail GP last year, and they're currently leading the season in 2025. So, Hamish, even though you're in Fiji, you're you're winging away in Fiji on the other side of the world. He's still having a big effect on the outcome of big sailing events right now in 2025. So that's a little bit about us, but Hamish, it's those 12 chapters as well that we think that we can use to help Joe with this process of helping him do better in the Tornado worlds.
Yeah, Joe, yeah, thanks for having us on. This was kind of a left field request, I would say, for what we're used to. And we both thought it was really interesting to have this question from Joe as to how could he improve. And we, it's certainly something we've never done before. So this is pioneering stuff for Road to Gold. We must have talked to well over 100 top sailors and in a kind of a Q&A format and from that, gained a massive amount of insight into how the minds work of top level yachties. But this is a whole new experience, and I'm really looking forward to this evening. And I know we're going to learn some stuff. So let's go back to Joe and find out what he wants to know.
The idea of this came from when you were talking to Glenn Ashby, and it kind of felt that Glenn Ashby's process works really well because he's winning. And that process is more difficult to be applied to somebody who's perhaps in the middle or further back in the fleet. So from the Road to Gold process, I've just been reviewing it again this morning. It does really highlight that one of my, perhaps my main issue with getting good results on the race course is the infrequency that I'm racing. So getting to go to perhaps 1 or 2 events each year, and I don't have any training partners or other boats that I can consistently train with. I think it is a byproduct of how much investment in time do I want to put into training specifically to go to an event when it's only one event in 1 year. I think what I'm looking for is to see what perhaps persistent mistakes I'm making on the race course, how those can be addressed. Like I'm consistently getting wrong. I wouldn't say pretty much any decisions, but it does feel like that sometimes, that every decision that's made is wrong. And there was I can't remember which chapter it was in Road to Gold, but how do you come out in a boat on boat kind of situation? Do you usually come out on top or you get beaten? Then that really does depend where I am in the fleet, as you might expect. Like if I'm further back in the fleet, I'm more likely to get ahead. But if I'm in like the top 5 or so, then these snarling wolves up there just have something else in their quiver that pretty much every time just takes me down. So looking at processes, perhaps a way of looking at the race course, the conditions, and just to make it as simple as possible to make good decisions. I think that's the main thing that I'm looking for out of this session.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. You know, the process that you go through in training has to be as much as possible simulating what you're trying to achieve in racing. And I mean, it's really interesting. You're talking about this World Championship coming up, and I'm sort of going through exactly that thing in my mind at the moment with my wing foiling. We have a regatta in a month's time, and I've been here in Fiji training every day on my wing foil and progressing. And I'm thinking, as a coach, with my coach's hat on for myself, what do I need to do to prepare for this event coming up in a month's time? And it would be very easy for me just to go wing foiling because it's really fun. And, you can hoon around and go, try to go 30 knots and, you can, whatever. You can do some sort of freestyle tricks and things. But what I need to do is I need to put some marks in the water. So every day I go out with just a couple of little fishing buoys, little mooring buoys with some dive weights attached. And they're only this big. So you could, if you haven't got that ability, you could carry them out on your Tornado easily enough. And then you'd put them in the water and right away you're going, just the process of going out training and going round marks forces a lot of things to happen. In your mind, you've got, the level of difficulty from a training day where you'd just be sort of sailing freestyle to a training period where you're simulating the racing. With the marks would probably make things about 100 times harder just because the marks are in the water. And then the intensity, how do you simulate the intensity of that regatta? because it's one thing to do things well without the pressure, but you need to be able to perform under pressure. You need to be able to make decisions under pressure. You need to be able to perform maneuvers under pressure. And typically, when you're just doing this on your own, there isn't the pressure there. You don't have the marks. You don't have that intensity of doing something quickly and efficiently on a race course. So you want to go as much as possible. You want to bring yourself to what you can remember of a regatta, and then simulate the training around that. So that would include the time. Typically, you'd go out for 2 races, so you'd try to simulate that amount of time in your training. Once you get down to the boat park to rig up your tornado, you want to make that intensity the same as it would be if you're at a regatta. So you don't want to just spend all morning, pulling the sails up. You want to have a time frame on that. Like my training session, my racing session starts at 4:00, so I want to be there to get out on the water, and you basically rehearse what it is you want to do. If it was a race day, and you rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. And, we've seen many times in the Road to God, and we talk about this as examples from my own experience, but just recently we had a young boy, Sean Herbert, who just got 3rd at his first ever wing foiling regatta in Silver Plana last week. And he had never faced up to any other wing foil racing outside New Zealand. And he suddenly rocked up and won the first day, hands down, against some Italian guy who was supposed to be the guru who went to wing foiling events every week. He lived on wing foiling events. So he had done his preparation well. And when I was watching him prepare in Manly, a little club in New Zealand with 2 other wing foiling people, I was watching him prepare, and I was like, this guy's doing everything right. They were racing around marks. They went out for a very short period with a very high level of intensity, and there was 2 of them. So suddenly I was seeing in front of me what I used to do myself back in the 80s, and I was going, wow, this kid is going somewhere. And I saw that in around Christmas 6 months ago, well, not even, 5 months ago. And now there he is, 3rd in his first World Cup wing foiling event. So it can happen, but it takes a lot of discipline and preparation. I've talked long enough now, Joe. You haven't had a chance to get onto another question or elaborate on your first question.
Thinking about that already. So it's because where the boat is at Wildwind, which is a sailing holiday place. And when you go there, you're instantly transformed into this holiday kind of vibe. But if when I went to the beach, it was as if I was leaving my rented accommodation and going to the venue and preparing the boat as if it was the event, with a time frame in mind, like first start at 11:00. So we've got to be on the water at that certain time, and then staying out for the right amount of time. That is going to make a big difference already. And definitely putting the boys in. And then it's kind of like the other thing we've got going on here is the wind is either 10 knots or 20 knots. And it's that bit of wind in between that we don't get. So like one of the things that I'm almost as much as training is going out sailing in the strong winds quite frequently. I already know my strong wind boat handling and speed and everything is good, but more to test the boat, because on a tornado like 49 or 470, sort of more complex boats, there's so many component parts that could fail. It's kind of like what I feel is the thing that can absolutely destroy a race for me more than anything would be like the mast coming down, for example. So to give the boat as much shakedown as possible, But then if I can combine that with getting some marks in the water, in the stronger wind, and making it so that when the wind is on, like even when it's like 15 knots or 14 knots, I want my boat handling to be better than anybody else's. But just from what you were saying with replicating the intensity of the race course, we do have quite a lively 15 boat laser fleet here, and the people who come out and do race training on the lasers here are generally pretty handy. So would you say that it's a good, you know, perhaps not too often, but to occasionally get on the race course with these laser sailors just to get into that competitive situation?
I think that's a great idea. I would definitely combine that into your training. And I've always felt that one of the best ways to learn is in yachting is to do a lot of other stuff in yachting, and you'll always bring something back with you. You know, the more you do, the more you learn. And I think jumping in the laser and having that intensity of those other 15 boats and fitting that into your training plan would be a great way to sharpen up your decision making and your tactics and strategy, even though they're different boats. And you know, when we're talking about addressing your making sure your boat is going to be you can trust your boat to stay together in the strong winds. A really good idea, what we always do is we take a spreadsheet, and you want to log the hours of everything on the spreadsheet. So you know quite quickly, you know that, you know, the gooseneck's going to be good for, 150 days sailing, and then it needs changing. You know, all these items have a lifespan, and all the Olympic sailors know that lifespan, and they log the hours, diary it down, so they know that, you know, it's one thing to take your boat out in strong winds and say, okay, well, it's survived a 20-knot day racing, so therefore it's going to survive the next day. It's an assumption that it will survive the next day. It's not until you actually log the hours of all the components that you realize that actually they all have a lifespan, and you need to know where they are in the lifespan of your setup. You know, the spinnaker halyard pulley, the spinnaker halyard cleat, the spinnaker halyard itself, all of those have a certain amount of hoists or a certain amount of days sailing in them, and then they need to be changed because the teeth get worn out, the bearings, you know, come apart, and everything will begin to fail. And so one of the things that gets you through a world championship is having a zero failure on your equipment.
Years ago, I did a training with Costas Trigonis. One of his things is it's the unforgivable thing to happen is for the boat to fail on the race course. So I've taken that with me. So if it's okay, can I just take you through, would you start at the start, or would we go before the start to what we should, you know, if when it comes to actually getting onto the race course?
I think that the day should begin for you at least 24 hours before. So a typical day for us as a, you know, day by day unfolds in a regatta. Once we're at the event is starting to understand what the next day will bring. And that understanding comes before dinner the night before. And while what you're doing is introducing the next day, so it might be a different condition than you've had before. So you then put the start line, like you could do it on the whiteboard. You put if you've got a Navionics on your iPad, you can set up the course, and you can think about what's likely to happen in 24 hours when you get out to race the next day, or 18 hours, whatever it is. And what happens is when you go to bed that night, you will be rehearsing that race in your mind. As you go to sleep, you'll be chewing it over all night long, and you'll wake up a lot better than you would if you didn't have that introduction the night before. So when you wake up, you then take another look at your phone and look at the forecast and go, yeah, looks like we're going to get that day that we planned for. So you have that reaffirmation in the morning, and then you obviously want a run. We want some kind of run sheet, because humans work best with routines, and so you want to have devised a daily plan. We call it a run sheet, the night before, which tells you when you're going to have breakfast, when are you going to get in the car and drive down, and those are all controllables. And the more things that you have under your control, the less anxiety and the less decisions you're going to need to make in the morning. And that means you'll be fresher for the race and you'll have less anxiety. So you'll follow the run sheet, you'll do your breakfast and you'll make your lunches, and then you'll get in the car at that specific time, and there'll be a feeling of accomplishment for doing that and ticking those things off. You'll arrive at the boat park at the time will work for you. You'll follow your normal rig up routine, and during that period, you'll know, again, the controllables. You know how long it takes. You know that you've checked the boat the night before. Even if there was something untoward turned up, you will have it under control. And then you'll look at the plan for the day and you'll see, okay, was an offshore wind? So how you manage your time before the start is going to be critical to how you perform. So if we sort of say loosely offshore wind, onshore wind, two different beasts. Offshore wind, you'll sail out with the wind away from the yacht club towards the race course, because the wind is offshore. It's always good to go to the top mark and stop and just have a look at the top mark from your platform of the Tornado, and just sit there for a while and just see what you can see, because it's changing, it's dynamic. The top mark's going to be a lot closer to the shore than the start, probably 1.5 miles closer to the shore than the start. And you want to know what's happening there. And then you'll race down the course to the start, and you'll get a feeling, how quick are the puffs moving. They'll be moving at a certain speed near the top mark. They might be moving faster near the start line at the bottom mark. And was one side feel better than the other side? You will have made some assumptions on that the night before, but you'll be verifying them or not as you sail down to the start. And again, for an offshore day, you'll want to be, it's a heads up day. So it's really important, is going to be your decisions and where you place yourself on the race course for the best wind. Those are going to be the priorities, the low-hanging fruit. So you'll want to spend more time sitting at the start looking at the race course from the start, and you'll look at all the other boats sailing up wind to the top. They're all frantically getting themselves sorted out. Each one of those boats is telling you a story, whether they're lifted, whether they're more heel, whether they're going faster, whether they're going slower than the boats on the other side of the course. So you'll get this amazing picture of the whole course painted for you by 15 or 20 or 30 other Tornadoes all doing their warm-up lap. It's really important to have the time to absorb that information and, again, reaffirm what it is that's important about winning the day.
It's certainly not something that I do at the moment. Like, I've never had a run sheet or something similar, but I can really see how that is going to help so much, rather than something getting missed or being late. The pre-start, would you, like, I'm just sort of thinking what it's going to be like potentially Thessaloniki in July, if it's super light wind, kind of onshore, and maybe it takes, I don't know, 15 minutes to sail to the windward mark. So I'm basically looking to get on the water to allow enough time to do that, to get a good idea to get that sort of insight into how the course is looking, would you say?
Yeah, so on onshore day, the priority is going to be around the boat speed and your start. So it's the low-hanging fruit. The priorities are pretty much the opposite of an offshore day, when sometimes a bad start puts you in a very good position. Halfway up the beat when you get spat out of a bad start. So going to a Thessaloniki, going to the onshore sea breeze days, it's really important to focus on speed. So trying to leave the shore with another boat in order to kind of line up and use that time on the way to the race area effectively to get a feeling for how your speed is, making small adjustments to your rig, to your feel, to get the boat going as well as it can, because speed is going to be your number one priority. And as you say, leaving enough time to get all the way to the top mark. And what you're looking for is timing the oscillations. How long do they take? How long is it going to be? Am I lifted? And how much am I lifted? Okay, I'm getting lifted now. It seems to be that I'm lifted for 3 minutes, and then I'm starting to be headed now. Seems like that phase is lasting another 3 minutes, and you get an idea of how many tacks you're going to do on the beat. Might be 12-minute beat, so you're starting to feel like it's an oscillating onshore breeze. Or you might already know that it's one side, which is often the case with an onshore breeze, one side's probably going to be favoured. But the usual priorities on an onshore day is getting good lanes and going fast. And the boats that win those days often come from both corners of the course, but they are the fastest boats that have been the least compromised by other boats. They've got the best lanes. So they've managed to start well, have a good lane, and then use their best speed, their VMG, to enable them to sail in clear air all the way to the top mark. And I think a lot of the stuff on the onshore days can be established beforehand. You'll have your playbook from past experience, from talking to the locals, and you'll know, where the favoured side of the course is. The sea breeze might be moving, to the right all day, or it could be, that, in an onshore day, it's better to get away from the shore. So it might be that generally it's better to get onto port tack after the start, enabling you to get into more breeze away from the shore. There'll be some rules, and every venue will have those idiosyncrasies or their playbook, and it'll be about being on that favoured part of the course and having the ability to start well enough to get there before the other boats.
If we're I don't know if it's jumping the gun, but we're talking general strategy. So if, like in Greece, very little current, if, let's say, going on to the right on port tack is favoured on the upwind, this might be a very obvious question, but should we then hit the same side on the downwind as if we took other boats out of the equation?
It's usually correct to say that. There is exceptions, and that, but I think that mainly because there'll be a lot more traffic on the favoured side on the downwind. So there's possible that another strategy, if you're, in that traffic part of the, where there's, that usually between, say, 15 and 30 around the top mark, it may be an opportunity not to jibe immediately, but to jibe as soon as you can. So focus on giving yourself that opportunity the moment you go around the mark to make yourself enough room by soaking down maybe a little bit more than the boat either side of you, in front and behind, in order to be able to do that early jibe. Because, a jibe at the top mark can be incredibly painful when you've got another 30 boats yet to go round on starboard tack lined up. So an early jibe is usually better and gets you out of the heavy traffic that could occur on that port tack ley line into the bottom mark. So, as a strategy, you might be thinking, okay, if I'm going to go around between 15, I don't know how many boats you're going to have at the Worlds, but if there's 80 boats, if I'm going to go around between 15 and 50, I might be looking to make an early jibe on the downwind in order to go to where there's less congestion. and therefore more clear air and more opportunity for you to sail your VMG and not be sort of dictated by the boats around you.
It's always so evident that on the downwind especially, you can just be held up by other boats so easily. Like if someone's directly in front of you, it means you can't just sail the boat. I think just having the freedom to sail the boat and stretch your legs on the downwind especially makes such a difference. What I'll do is once the start line is definitely set, and generally when they do like the 5 minute signal or when they drop the postponement flag, I'll position my boat to the side of the pin end, look down the line and take a transit. Sort of 7 times out of 10 we don't even use the transit, but then it's kind of like knowing that we've got it, and then sort of skip forwards in time a little bit. And then so what my mindset is that I don't want to be caught up in, like, if I go with the kind of bunch over by the committee boat, it's kind of like so easy to be trapped over there. So my favored strategy start is to come in on port tack, find a gap, because as we come away from the committee boat, it seems to be like the, what would you call it, the general trend of the fleet is there'd be a big bunch there, and then the bunch would thin out as we get onto the line, like with about half minutes to go, let's say. And then I'd find the I like here, and this is, I come in this way so that I can get a really good look at where all the other boats are. Whereas if I kind of came in from here and went around, I wouldn't have quite such a clear view. And then I find the gap that I like the look of, and then I'll tack into some space and then just hold that position and try to fend off as many boats as possible that are having a look at it. Like, for example, if somebody's looking to come in like right underneath, I'll drop the Traveller to just have the boat sat at an angle slightly more off the wind. And then almost every time I'm aiming to start like 2/3, 3/4 of the way down the start line, just to have that kind of consistent, low risk ability to get away. Because then that's the general strategy. And then the one thing that sometimes goes wrong with that is if somebody is too close underneath us, then we're getting some sort of, and because we might be getting some sort of dirty wind, like off the windward side of their sails, or because we're a bit heavier, perhaps, than a lot of the other teams, we might not be able to point as high and maintain the speed, which means that by the time we're up here, we've dropped kind of behind them. So that is but if we gap, then we can bear off a little bit, get a bit more speed, and then even in like 8 knots, because we've got the weight, we can pin the boat down and carry that speed and get the nose out a little bit and maintain that clear wind. If you could pick some holes in that as a general strategy, that would be great.
I think, I mean, it's a very safe option the way you've described it. I think, it's a good default strategy to plan your start like that. There's risk. There's more risk than other alternatives. But if you go to Thessaloniki and you'll already be doing your homework and you and you decide that the right side of the course is favoured, then you're going to end up on the left side of the fleet with the strategy that your starting strategy. And you've got to see of the fleet is the key thing. So even though you're not really you're not at the pin, so you're not really particularly left of the course, but you've got 70% of the fleet on your right-hand side. So with that start, you'll have 70% of the boats ahead of you at the top mark, assuming that the right side's better. So you're going to need to have a different strategy for improving your performance on a right-favoured track. Like a good example, we have a British guy who was he was a shit starter. And so the only way he figured out to start well was to line up at the boat, the race committee boat, and tack, because he knew he would have a lane. He was going to get such a shit starter, he knew if he was there, he would have a more chance of getting a good lane on port if he started at the race committee boat and tacked. Because there might be one or two boats that are trying to do that as well, but that's providing less traffic than the problem of getting a bad start, I should say, 2/3 down the line. You've got to contend with potentially the whole fleet being in your road. So if you're planning if you're planning negatively for a poor start, you're much better off to have a poor start at the race committee boat than you are having a poor start down the line, because your opportunity to gain freedom on port into clear air is much higher. And I think the other thing, if you look at the symmetry of the race area, generally speaking, anybody with a good start will continue on starboard because they're feeling good, they're in the front row. And so generally on an onshore day, that's about half the fleet, or maybe more. 60 or 70% of the fleet are going to have a good enough start to be able to stay on starboard. So that means if you want the right, then you can get onto port earlier than them, then you are going to be, assuming you're correct in saying the right's better, you're going to be ahead of all of those good starters as well. Even if you got a not as good a start, but you're going to the right from the race committee boat. So I think it's good to think about how do you connect your start to your strategy. And if you're starting down the line is a good way of getting a good start, but it doesn't connect you to what you want to achieve on your strategy. It would be a great place to start if you wanted to go left and the left side was favoured. But if you wanted to go right and the right side's favoured, it's not a good place to start.
Yeah, so it's kind of like maybe what I'm looking at a bit too much is I'm looking at not having any options before the start, but then by doing that and starting over here, it's taking away all my options after the start. I'm totally committed to going left until there's either a gap or and then a very emotional, exciting time seeing if we can get in front of other people and stuff. Yeah. Occasionally this kind of like this feeling that says, go on, start on port tack. And then there's the, but what if we don't make it? What if one boat gets us? And I would imagine that's the feeling whenever you're looking at a port tack start.
Yeah, I think a port tack start is very, very good on a shiftier day because you're able to get yourself into a position where you can see the race course much better and much more quickly. If you get a starboard tack, you get locked into a group of boats and you can't see the race course. You can't really see what's going on because there are other boats in the road. But if you get a port tack start and you pull it off, there's more chance you'll pull it off because it's so shifty. And there's also, it gets you a bigger reward. The higher risk port tack start is when you do it on a steady day, and an opening at the race committee boat for you to sneak through, so you dip the whole fleet and you basically sheet it in behind the last boat coming off the race committee boat, and you're able to have enough speed to carry on and miss their anchor chain, anchor warp, and you've got so much speed that the boat that starts well at the race committee boat will not interfere with you because they've got to do a tack. If they want to go right, they've still got to do a tack, and you can just shoot underneath them and be strong on them by the time they finish their tack. Now, that's a really good strategy, but I don't know the quality of the Tornado fleet. I imagine that there's going to be a lot of people, say, stacked up at the race committee boat trying to barge in, and so there'll be some stragglers that'll come round the corner at you on starboard, and you won't find the gap you need to get through. And it's high risk. If there's no gap, well, there's no plan B. So yeah. I think if I was you, if I want the ride, I'd probably get into the race committee boat position very early. Not being greedy about it. So probably only 2 or 3 lengths above the ley line with a minute to go. So that if the worst came to the worst, you're following one boat into the race committee for your start. But hopefully, if you've timed it well, you'll end up being either at the race committee boat at 0 or 1 or 2 down from the race committee boat at 0. And then what you can do if you don't quite accelerate well enough is that you can immediately look to tack. As soon as you get spat and you can swing the bows, then immediately look to tack. And then if you can do that, so a poor start at the race committee boat gives you that option to tack. And you might have a completely clear race field in front of you, or you might have one of the very best starters from the race committee boat tacking as well, which means you're going to have to reach off or pinch up or let them have their place, but you've got to find a place next to them on port. But that's still a lot more manageable than coming from the other end of the line and trying to, well, if you have a poor start down there, you're taking sterns of all the 70 boats, if you're trying to get out of it early, that 70% that are to windward of you on the line, and that becomes painful. You're also taking a lot more dirty air to get behind that 70% of boats that's further up the line to find a lane. So I think, getting into the queue early, we call it the queue at the race committee boat, and being very good at managing your leeway, so that you don't, or understanding your leeway, so that you arrive at the back of the race committee boat at 0. Yeah, and you can look at the risk. If you're on the right, if you're at the race committee, you're on the right of the whole fleet.
Yeah.
So you're already winning the race, if the right's better. But you then get stragglers coming through behind you, and you're going to have to evaluate how many of them do you want to allow you to get to the right of where you are. So, you'll be saying, well, okay, there's 3 gone right, but the rest of the fleet's below me. I'm ahead of them, so I'm happy to keep holding. But if you find there's like 5 or 10 started to go behind you on port, and that the right is better, then you're going to just be looking for a good lane to go with them.
I think in most catamaran racing, it's quite normal to sort of keep the tacks down to a minimum. So that would mean that we're just going to hit the corner and tack, but we might be quite a long way from the ley line. What would be the right kind of decision there? Because if we tacked on like 90 degrees where we're feeling, yeah, okay, if the wind holds, we can get round the buoy, but that also depends on if there aren't other boats that come in and tack, or perhaps even come in, go a bit further, and then start giving us dirty wind.
Yeah.
So what we've always been doing is going, sometimes sailing what you'd describe as too much distance, just as insurance against those things when coming up to this right-hand ley line. Is there a magic fix for this? or or
I think it's a very class dependent question, but some boats and saying that within the same boat, you'll find that being overstood in 12 knots to 20 knots is no problem, because your VMG is still very, very good in a low fast mode compared to in a high pointy mode. Or getting gas, which is the two other options, two other negatives. So overstanding when it's 12 to 20 knots in a tornado, I'm guessing you probably don't pay a too big a price. And so if you're heading out to the right and you look over your shoulder and you go, I'm probably leading this race, then you want to nail the ley line with just a little margin of insurance. But if you're getting out to the ley line, you think I'm probably 10th or something till 15th, but it's more than 12 knots, I'm going to give myself a bigger buffer, because I don't want to do two more tacks, and I don't want to have somebody coming. You want to encourage people to tack below you on the ley line, and obviously the closer you get to the mark, the more likely boats are going to tack on the ley line, not go all the way to you, because it's obvious the closer you get to the top mark where that ley line is. But if you're in the corner early, it's less obvious. So I think as a general rule, you'll give yourself more buffer or insurance the further away you are, the earlier you are in that corner. And if the wind is strong enough to give you a good fast low mode. If the wind is lighter, then you haven't got that fast low mode anymore. It's not an option. Quite a lot of boats will underperform when reaching, because you're getting less apparent wind when you reach in 8 knots or 6 knots. You want to have the boat on the wind to get the most apparent wind, to get the best VMG. So in lighter wind, it's often the case that the winners are coming from, they win their side early. So they come out of the right early, not near the ley line, but they're the first out of that side, making hay while the sun shines, as they say. And they don't mind doing another tack back up again to that side if it still looks good, or even crossing to not a ley line on port, but somewhere near ley line on port, which gives you a very strong position at the top mark, because you're not going to have gas. So it actually works out as a winning strategy in lighter wind to often, go early to a side and come out early from that side. I always think of it as winning your battle on your side, winning a side early, and that usually means that you've started towards the ends of the line where there is more wind, and when it's light, under 10 knots, the benefit of that extra wind pressing around the fleet is much greater than it is when it's windy. So you're getting the added benefit of that accelerated wind that's going around the obstacle of all the boats starting. So in light air, start near the ends of the line and get to the sides early. Come out of the side early and then finish the job either by crossing to an easy, comfortable port tack approach, or returning to the right at a later time and finding a good lane nearer the top mark, where it's easy to see where that lane will be on a ley line.
Yeah, that's so good, clear, definitive. Light winds get to the outside, be outside of the fleet.
Yeah.
And then so much. I'm just kind of just summarising what you've just said, but so light winds, don't worry about or definitely don't overstand in light winds. I think that's the bottom line. And be tack knowing that you might have another 2 tacks to throw in. The other scenario is if we had gone left, which would now be because the left side is favoured, not just because we've been trapped on the start line. We've changed, and then there's the amount of traffic. My sort of always my mindset is we're not going to try to get in where there's not room. Although there's a lot of people that I dare say in every class that will insist that there is room when there's not room, and to tack in sort of here is like sort of wind shadow suicide. So we usually just get on the outside of this sort of stack like this.
Yeah. I think there's two things you can do in this situation. If you're going to look like you're going to lead round or be close to leading round, then the port tack approach can be quite ley line-ish, or even, like even with a few boat lengths above, and you can sort of at the last minute dive down and you might take one stern and find your way through and tack. But if you're deeper than that, then you don't want to be near that port tack ley line because there's a lot of traffic bearing away and putting spinnakers up, so you've got a real dead zone there. And B, if you approach on port with 100 meters to go on starboard, if you approach that ley line there's very good chance that there'll be some separation between the boats on starboard, and you only need to have a boat length separation, and if you can bear away and come in with speed and go through that gap and then set up on starboard above, and you're always better to thread the needle, go through a gap between the bow and stern very fast, and then set up on starboard with your own space than you are tacking to leeward. It's you're better to like take your medicine, if you like, and add those extra boat lengths that you might be paying to go further on port. You'll be rewarded for them in that last 50 meters because you'll have plenty of clear air, and all those boats that don't, which will be a lot, or coming in late and trying to jam it in at the end, you'll benefit on them. So yeah, it's a strategy. I think depends on where you are in the fleet, but if you look like you're going to be leading, then don't be afraid of getting right up to the port tack ley line. But if you look like you're going to be in the bunch, then be sure you're 100 meters. You've got 100 meters left on starboard at least to make your final approach to the starboard tack ley line on port.
Yeah, I've whenever I've been going off left, and if it's been feeling good going left, even if I'm like mid-fleet, because it feels good and I feel like I'm getting some sort of benefit, I've always been going to that ley line in the past and then paying for it when I get there, and then being surprised that the boats that tacked off early, like you say, like 100 meters earlier, are coming in and they're dominating us when we get to the mark. So that makes absolute sense not to just keep going because it feels good. I think got to get away from that. Yeah.
And I'm assuming there's just one top mark. I can see you've got two top marks.
Oh, yeah. So we've got a spacer or a spreader.
Oh, yeah. Okay. You've got a reaching. Yeah, cool.
If there's a bit of wind, things happen way too quickly down here because we might be doing over 20 knots coming down here. My sort of opening strategy is like, and this is from coming from sort of mid-fleet, is when I think I'm leaving the decision making for which mark to go round too late. I think having the general strategy, okay, if there were no other boats, and right was good the first lap, we'll go right again. But generally, mid-fleet traffic. So I would rather go the wrong way and not be sat right behind someone on the next upwind. That's generally what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I think the other thing, at strong winds, obviously, you don't want to overstand. Like it becomes more painful. You give up a lot more by going past the ley line. Whereas in light winds, it's often the reverse. You gain more by getting wider towards the bottom. So I think it's important to hedge one way or the other. And in light air, you do not want to be caught in between those marks in light air, because you'll end up parking up, and all the boats wider than you will come in with speed and own one of those marks, and you'll be going around 3 wide and slow. In strong wind, you're better to make your jibe a little bit earlier than you think. You don't want to be later than you think for your final approach, because you got the abilities soaked down, and then you can just decide, as you say, where the most traffic looks to be. And you need to evaluate that downwind traffic is just as annoying or expensive as upwind traffic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if there's a big bunch that are coming downwind behind you on port, then you want to try to do the left turn exit to have, cleaner air from that downwind traffic. So you've got to evaluate both the upwind traffic and the downwind traffic when you make a decision on which mark to finally turn around.
Yeah, and there's quite a few times when we'd be coming in like outside here with the original kind of plan to go around this buoy, but then maybe there's something going on down here, and we'll make the last minute decision to sail, I suppose, maybe even sailing a slightly larger distance to get to the other buoy, and because we feel like we can carry our speed through. So perhaps this is something that's not happening as much in monohulls, but maybe in catamarans it's happening a bit more, maybe, or maybe this is just me and thinking let's keep hold of that speed for a bit longer rather than putting in another jibe.
Yeah, and you remember what happens is you're coming downwind in a catamaran probably almost twice as fast as you go upwind. So you've got to make use of that extra speed. And so coming back to the decision you have to make is, let's say the right side's better, and so automatically you think that the left turn is going to be taking you to the right side. But everybody's going to try and do that. If you were coming in with a massive amount of speed, let's say you're coming in at let's say 20 knots, and your upwind speed's 10 knots, you've got to burn that speed somehow, because otherwise you'll end up just reaching. At some stage, you need to bring the speed down to 10 knots. I'm only guessing what the number are, but you've got to bring your speed down to the upwind speed in order to get the apparent wind correct on your sails. Otherwise, you'll end up reaching forever. So you can go to the other mark and make a right turn and then burn your speed by going into attack. And then you've got no traffic. You're hipped up on all the traffic's going left turn and possibly even reaching for a bit because they've taken a while to burn their speed. You'll often see boats come around and they'll luff to burn their speed and then get into their VMG. Well, you come around and tack on the other mark, and suddenly you've got yourself a really good lane going to the correct side of the course by going to the other mark. So it's a good strategy to consider.
Yeah, so that kind of like coming up and tacking to come across.
Yeah, if you wanted to go left. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or of course, coming up and then
exactly if you want to go right. Yeah, yeah. And then you're burning your speed. You come out of your tack, you're building speed, but you'll find you've got a lane. If you're just concerning yourself with the upwind traffic, you'll have a good lane sitting there, compared to what typically happens is everybody want the right, so they'll do the left turn, and then they'll be following bow to stern out to the right, and only most people will be paying other than the leader, everybody's going to be paying a penalty for that.
Yeah, this is another real gem, actually, this one, because if we knew this way was good, but there was traffic, we'd come around this way, and we'd just go that way because that's the way that we're going. Kind of like almost like hoping that because we're out in space with clean wind, we're going to be all right. But then to tack, and then suddenly we've got all this space, but we're going the right way as well.
Well, it's hard to practice new things in the heat of battle. It's really not the ideal thing. In fact, Hamish must be dealing with this problem all the time in Sail GP because these teams don't get much training time, so they're sort of having to learn on the hoof. But Hamish, you'd be mad if you tried to do an Olympic campaign like that. You try all this stuff in training so that you've got this nailed before you go racing. But Sail GP scenario is a little bit more like what Joe's looking at here because he's only got limited time between this Zoom call, and him competing at the Tornado World. So talk us through that scenario that you deal with in Sail GP and limited training time.
Well, we spend a lot of time rehearsing, basically, creating playbooks for all the different venues and the different starting scenarios. You got some starting boxes, they're called, some are bigger, some are small, and every venue has a unique weather pattern. So a huge amount of it is rehearsal. So even though you're not actually sailing, you can still do that rehearsal with the team. Sometimes you do it in smaller groups. Sometimes you do it with a wider team. But the more time you spend, rehearsing that next scenario, which for us has just been New York, the better, the more chance you have of hitting the ground running. And regarding starts as an example was something that sometimes you have to undo what you used to do because what you used to do wasn't working, and to learn something new, you have to throw the old book out the window and start again. And we've just done that with the Spanish team, from the beginning of the season to now, and we're actually finally getting some much more consistent starts than we've ever had. So these are things that are required, firstly unlearning and then relearning. But we never stop. The sailing is a fantastic sport for that reason, and that's why we all love it, because it keeps throwing curveballs at us. Every venue is slightly different, every boat's slightly different, and that's the beauty of our sport.
Well, Joe, thank you for taking us round the race course. I hope that you've seen the kind of insights that Hamish can provide. It's been sort of a fascinating look into the journey around the race course and also all the preparation that goes in before then. And I'm hoping that anyone watching this might be sufficiently intrigued to want to look into the Road to Gold course. It's a 12-chapter online video course. The sequence of those chapters and the order in which you tackle the different subjects is also extremely important. It's a step-by-step process going through the course, and at the end of it you will be a better sailor. If you've consumed that and thought about it and applied it to your own scenario, in your case the tornado, you will be a better sailor at the end of going through that. And we've had people that have already won their Olympic medals, both as sailors and coaches, that have bought this course. We've also had club racers that thought they were never going to haul themselves out of the back of the fleet, and they're wondering, Road to Gold sounds a bit elite for me. I'm not up there going for gold. I'm just trying to get my way out of the back of the pack. Well, we've sold courses to those people as well. We've asked them to try the 30-day money-back guarantee, apply the principles, and it works even better. The lower down the fleet, the lower your level of sailing, these principles still apply. It's just that they apply to an even higher degree, because you're taking new processes, new principles, and making it work at whatever level of the sport.
So thanks very much, Hamish. This has been absolutely amazing. And I think that differences are going to be made.
Joe, thank you so much. All the best at the Worlds. Can't wait to see how you do, and can't wait to catch up with you afterwards and debrief it all.
Cool. All right, thanks. So, yeah, I'll see you soon with some more on Joyrider TV. And thanks to everybody that has been supporting my campaign to get to the Tornado Worlds. And, yeah, I'll see you there.